Did you ever watch a trade go down and immediately ask yourself, what the hell was that GM thinking? These are the dumbest trades in NBA history. Starting with a 2022 trade that was maybe the biggest overpay in NBA history. We're talking about Rudy Gobert, who got traded to Minnesota for 5 players.
They send Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverley, Jared Vanderbilt, the number 22 overall pick, Walker Kessler,
and 5 first-round picks. Granted, Rudy was a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, and his production on that side of the floor is undeniable. But offensively, Gobert is often just a bystander who can't dribble, pass, or shoot.
Gobert's gonna shoot a 3.
And he'll be earning upward of $40 million until 2026. Also, 2 of the guys the Wolves traded for him actually played better defense than Rudy in 2023. If that wasn't catastrophic enough, the Timberwolves could have also traded for Kevin Durant that same summer. In 2022, without Rudy, the Wolves won 48 games, and with him in 2023, they won just 41. In 2024, the Timberwolves have finally figured out how to incorporate the big Frenchman within their offense. But with 2 other All-Stars and a great supporting cast, they should have been a winning team even without the Gobert trade. But hey, if their team keeps winning, then maybe it wasn't such a bad trade after all. And we all know Rudy was paid like his basketball skills cure cancer. But the GM who orchestrated this trade is widely considered the sneakiest NBA GM of the last 20 years. Danny Ainge began his executive career in 2003, and his ruthless decision-making earned him the nickname Trader Danny. In 2007, Ainge's genius shined to the fullest when he traded for Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, who had 17 All-Star selections between them and would win the 2008 title in Boston. But the best part is that all that Ainge gave up was a young and unproven Jeff Green and Al Jefferson, a few picks, and a couple of guys who were on their last NBA legs. And this was just the beginning of Ainge making other general managers look stupid. In 2017, Ainge bamboozled the Sixers for an extra first-round pick when he gave them the number 1 overall pick, which they used on the broken Markelle Fultz, while Ainge got the 3rd pick that became Jason Tatum. Later that year, Ainge basically conned the Cavaliers when he gave them an injured Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder for Kyrie Irving. But Ainge's coup de grace and his absolute GM masterpiece was how he fleeced Billy King and the Brooklyn Nets. In 2013, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Jason Terry were a combined 110 years old and were on 1-year deals when Brooklyn made one of the most boneheaded trades ever, going all in with a weak hand. For the ancient package from Boston, the Nets paid a king's ransom, 5 players and 4 first-round picks, which later turned into Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. After the Nets got dominated by LeBron in the 2014 playoffs, Pierce and KG left, and Brooklyn was stuck with a bad roster and no first-round picks, which crippled their franchise for years. However, that Nets catastrophe is nothing when you compare it to what the Clippers did in 1976. The Clippers were then known as the Buffalo Braves, and what they did that season was the worst year of executive decisions, not just in the NBA, but in all of sports. See, the Braves had 3 Hall of Fame players in their prime, plus a Hall of Fame coach. And in the space of just 1 year, they messed it all up. First, after he lost the 1976 Conference Finals, the Braves fired coach Jack Ramsey, who would go on to win the NBA title with Portland the very next season. 2 months later, when the ABA merged with the NBA, Buffalo got incredibly lucky to select Moses Malone in the expansion draft. Malone was already an All-Star in the ABA, but when he came to the Braves, they inexplicably kept him on the bench. When Malone protested, they traded him just 2 weeks into the season in exchange for 2 first-round picks. Malone would go on to win 3 MVP awards, along with 12 more All-Star selections, and he's in the top 5 all-time in rebounds and top 10 in points. But the Braves weren't done yet, because in 1972, Buffalo drafted Bob McAdoo, and by 1976, McAdoo was already a 4-time All-Star, 3-time scoring champion, and the league MVP. But that clearly wasn't good enough for the Braves, who traded one of the top 3 players in the NBA to the Knicks for John Gianelli, a guy who averaged 8 points per game. But that's not all, folks, because the Braves also had Adrian Dantley, a future 6-time All-Star and 2-time scoring champion. Dantley averaged 20 points per game for Buffalo and won 1977 Rookie of the Year, after which the Braves traded him for Billy Knight. Granted, Knight was an all-star, so this move wasn't so terrible, or at least it wouldn't have been, if the Braves hadn't also traded Knight after only one season. If they kept those 3 future Hall of Famers and Coach Ramsey, the Braves could have dominated the league for the next 15 years. But like a drunk millionaire, they squandered everything for 10 cents on the dollar. However, Bob McAdoo and Moses Malone weren't the only Hall of Fame centers to get traded for virtually nothing. In fact, almost every great big man of that era got exchanged for peanuts. In 1975, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar decided that he was done with Milwaukee and demanded a trade to either New York or LA. And despite having the 2 richest teams bidding for the best NBA player, the Bucks couldn't muster more than Junior Bridgman, Dave Myers, and Elmore Smith, none of whom averaged more than 13 points per game in their career. 10 years earlier, another franchise was stuck in the corner and had to trade the best player in the NBA. In 1965, the San Francisco Warriors got into financial trouble, and their only way out was to trade Wilt Chamberlain. However, the return for the man who averaged 41 points and 25 rebounds for their franchise was extremely slim. Connie Dierking, who averaged 8 points per game and got traded away just 1 year later, Paul Newman, who retired after 3 years and 13 points per game, and Lee Schaefer, who retired before playing a single game for the Warriors. Meanwhile, Wilt would go on to win the title with the Sixers, but after just 4 years, he demanded another trade. And just like the Warriors, the Sixers also dropped the ball, receiving 2 players who averaged less than 10 points per game, and Archie Clark, who was an aging all-star past his prime. But as dramatic as Wilt's lopsided trades were, it's even crazier what happened to his arch-nemesis, Bill Russell. Before the 1956 NBA draft, the Celtics coach and GM Red Auerbach first traded all-star Ed Macauley and Cliff Hagan to the St. Louis Hawks to move up in the draft and secure the second pick. The Hawks didn't want to draft Russell because their owner was racist, and so they were glad to make the deal with the Celtics. Still, Boston was in a bad position because the Rochester Royals also wanted Russell, and they were picking number 1. But since the Celtics owner also owned the Ice Capades, a hit ice skating traveling show, Auerbach convinced Rochester to pass on Russell in exchange for several Ice Capades performances over the years. Somehow, both the Hawks and the Royals accepted those deals, and Russell became a Celtic, where he would win 11 championships in the next 13 seasons. However, this wasn't the last time Red Auerbach fooled somebody to create a dynasty. After he gambled and drafted Larry Bird in 1978, before his final year of college, Auerbach wasn't done, and he pulled off an even bigger miracle in the 1980 NBA draft. The Celtics had the 1st and 13th overall selection that year, but the old fox Auerbach decided to trade those 2 picks to Golden State for Robert Parrish and the 3rd overall pick, which they used on Kevin McHale, who combined for 16 All-Star seasons with the Celtics. In the span of just 2 years, Auerbach formed the greatest front court in NBA history, and the media dubbed the trade for Parrish and McHale the steal of the century. But the Celtics' biggest rival, and a franchise that's tied with Boston with 17 NBA titles, is also no stranger to dumb trades. The LA Lakers won their last championship in 2020, and they kept largely the same team in 2021, when they had the best defense in the NBA. But after the unlucky injuries to both AD and LeBron, the Lakers got bounced out of the 2021 playoffs in the first round, and then they stupidly decided to part ways with the best perimeter defense in the NBA to add another layer of golden paint. In one of the worst deals in Lakers history, LA sent out Kyle Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Montrezl Harrell, and 1 first-round pick in exchange for a 33-year-old Russell Westbrook and his max contract. Because of that, they also couldn't pay Alex Caruso and Dennis Schroeder, which plummeted their defense and killed their floor spacing. Even with LeBron and AD, LA played ugly, inefficient, and ultimately losing basketball for a year and a half. And they could do nothing about it because Westbrook's massive contract constricted them from making any meaningful additions. Finally, during the 2023 trade deadline, the Lakers got rid of Russ, after which they had the best record in the remaining part of the season. But for some franchises, the worst mistakes don't happen when they misjudge the existing NBA talent, but the future ones. The worst draft trade ever happened in 1996, when the Hornets drafted Kobe Bryant, but then immediately traded him to the Lakers for Vlade Divac, who spent just 2 years in Charlotte and averaged 11 points per game. Then there's also the 1998 draft when the Bucks traded Dirk Nowitzki to Dallas for Robert "Tractor" Traylor, who averaged just 4.5 points per game in 2 years in Milwaukee, while Dirk scored over 30,000 points for the Mavs. The 1987 draft, when the Supersonics gifted Scottie Pippen to the Bulls in exchange for Olden Polynice, also deserves to be mentioned. However, in the last 10 years in the NBA, most big lopsided trades happen when a disgruntled superstar wanted to change teams. In 2012, James Harden wanted to get a max contract from the Thunder, who lowballed him and offered him $5 million less. The Beard felt disrespected, and the Thunder panicked, swiftly trading him to the first bidder. Daryl Morey, whom Harden currently hates more than anyone.
Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of.
Correctly believed that James was a superstar.
Obviously, working hard to get back to being a championship contender, and we feel like James Harden is a player we can build around.
And he got him for 20 cents on the dollar. In the next 9 seasons, James averaged almost 30 points per game for the Rockets, and his trade was the beginning of the end for the Thunder's dynasty. And a guy who wasn't always Harden's biggest fan.
We said, I would hate to play with this guy. Yeah. He dribble, and then shoots a step back three.
Did the exact same thing as James 20 years earlier. In 1992, Charles Barkley felt that he was rotting in Philadelphia and wasting his prime on a bad team. So the Sixers agreed to trade Barkley, who was arguably the second best player in the world. But all they got for him was a season and a half of Jeff Hornacek and a couple of bench riders. Some honorable mentions are when Indiana traded Alex English to Denver just before he blossomed into an 8-time All-Star, or when the Spurs traded the best rebounder in NBA history to the Bulls for Wilt Perdue, who averaged 4 points and 4 rebounds per game. If you want to learn more about the NBA, click on this video right here and subscribe to Nonstop.